this. It's another morning. I am driving to work. It's a little bit of a stop and go traffic, but it's still actually kind of early, and so the sun is hitting my face. I'm sorry I have to wear my sunglasses because otherwise I'll be squinting the whole time. But it's a beautiful morning drive, and as usual, as I'm driving, I got a long commute. I'm thinking out loud. I'm meditating. One of my favorite things to do is to meditate on some verses of scripture, and I have been meditating on Psalm 145 this week, and I thought that it would be great if you join me on one of my morning rides and we think out loud together. Verses 14, 15, and 16 in Psalm 145 say, Somech Adonai lechol chanoflim, v'zokef lechol hakfufim. The Lord sustains all who fall and raises up all who are bowed down. Einei kol elecha yeshaberu, ve'ata noten lachem et ochlam beito. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food in due time. Potech et yadecha, umashbia lechol chai ratzon. You open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. Psalm 145 is a psalm that focuses primarily on praise. And as I look at these verses, I notice, and you probably do too, right away, that they have to do with God being our sustainer, and talks about God being our provider. And so it enters the context of food. And I don't know if you know this about me or not, but my academic interest actually is in food and meals and dining and the whole entire culture, or ancient culture, that has to do with food sharing. So I love this verse in particular because it speaks to me on a different level. I'm always studying food, and food pops up right here, but not right away though. And because as I start reading the psalm in English, it makes it sound as if it is talking about food right away, but not in Hebrew. The first sentence that we read here in verse 14 is made up of two stanzas, and the first part says, Somech Adonai lechol chanoflim. The second part, V'zokef lechol hakfufim. So I don't know if you hear a little bit of the parallelism right here right away, but even with the endings, you hear a little bit of a connection. It usually translates, and so the translation I read earlier, it says, the Lord sustains all who fall and raises up all who are bowed down. Well, I don't know if I would translate it like that, because the word sustains, to me, at least in English, I'm thinking, food context. I need sustenance or something like that. But that's not what the verb samach actually means. So if you were to study the verb samach in Hebrew, you would see that the way it is used in biblical Hebrew, it usually has to mean something like lift up or raise up or hold up. It is some sort of a support system. But it also can mean actually to lean upon something. Like, I need to lean on you because I need help, because I need to steady myself. So in Jewish tradition, there's a special ceremony. It's called ordination for the rabbis, semicha. It's called leaning. And so people literally put their hands, the laying of hands, the tradition, putting your hands on somebody. Really, that's what it means, semicha. I'm leaning on you. And so we say today in modern language ordination, but really what that ceremony represents is leaning upon somebody. So you are holding yourself up by transferring just a little bit of your weight upon them. It's a beautiful symbolic idea, and this is exactly the verb that is being used right here in this passage. So samach does not really mean to sustain, but it does have this idea of support. So I would really say raise up or lift up better. But then I come to the second part of my translation, and it says, and raises up all who bow down. So those who fall down to the ground, they need to be raised up, right? They picked up, essentially. That's what we're talking about. But the second part of the verse says, and raises up all who are bowed down. Now, how does that translate? Well, once again, the word zokef here is a parallel. So you have samach and zakaf. two verbs that really play off of each other. But does it mean to raise up? Not exactly. The first situation, you actually have somebody fallen that needs to be raised up. But in the second situation here, hakufim is somebody who is bent over. Okay, so hakaf is to bow, to bend, like whether you bow in reverence to the Lord when you come and you bend, sort of say, your body, and you make this motion in Near East, you show with your body respect. This is the same situation here. To be bent, whether you're bent because you are bowing on purpose or you're bent because your back hurts and you can't unbend. I don't know if that happens to you sometimes. You know, you get up in the morning and you just cannot unbend. You feel like you're twisted up and you just don't have that. And so you kind of go through your day hoping that you will get straightened out sometimes. So I think this is what the psalmist is actually writing about, that God straightens out your body. And so that's what it means to me. I mean, I don't think this has to do with sustenance per se, and that's why I think that particular choice of translation may not be the best. But this is clearly a picture of God who takes part in our daily life, and he is not oblivious to what's going on with us. So then we come to the next verse, and it says, the eyes of all look to you. What I see right away that's interesting to me in this text is this verb. I'm always focusing on the verb. So, yeshaberu. They look to you. Shaver is not a common verb in Hebrew. So we have lots of verbs in Hebrew that talk about looking, gazing. This is not the typical one. This is not a verb that expresses seeing. It expresses the idea of hope and anticipation. To look in this case is to expect, is to wait for something. Like, I am looking to you with this pause, expecting for you to respond. That's really what this word means. It's to look in the sense of to expect. So the Hebrew literally says that the eyes of all look with expectation to you. Now, you can't see that in English, but it's right there. So because this unusual verb that is being used. The second part of the verse, this is where the food context comes in. It says, Ve'ata noten lachem et ochlam be'ito. And you give them their food in due time. Ochlam is just a generic reference to something that you eat. Ochel means food, so you give them their food. The important part is be'ito. 8 means time, like a period of time or a span of time, but it's a clear reference to a specific moment. And so for many of us today, wherever we may be, we're living in the Western world, we're certainly not as much concerned with these issues, because to us food always comes on time. When is the time? Whenever we decide it to be, because we have plenty of food. But in many other societies, and in the ancient Middle East in particular, at that moment in history when the writer is writing this, food is not something guaranteed. In fact, you spend most of your time throughout your day working to procure food or to prepare food. So food coming on time is actually a big deal. So now I get to verse 16, and it's a bit more meaningful to me because this is a very familiar verse. This particular verse is a part of daily Jewish prayers that recited after a meal. It says, Poteach et yadecha umashbia lichol chai ratzon, which translates, you open your hand and you satisfy the desire of every living thing. I think it's a very good translation, by the way. You open your hand and you satisfy. You feed, literally. That's what the verb means. You feed, you nourish. Chai means life, living. Chol means everything that is living. And ratzon, the desire. I think it's a good choice to translate desire because want, desire, need, delight, however you want to translate this particular word, it fits in the greater context of the verse. Now, the word that I am specifically drawn to in verse 16 that I'm reading right now is the word poteach. Ptach means to open. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but in Jewish tradition, the big part of the prayer comes after the meal, not before the meal. It's customary, I think, for Jews and Christians to thank God at mealtime. But for Jews, you say a very, very basic, quick thank you, bless you in the beginning. Then you eat, and then after the meal is when you actually spend some serious time praying. You take a pause, you stop, and you thank God for His sustenance. So this particular verse is woven into a traditional Jewish prayer after meal. And sometimes I've observed this custom. It's a quirky little thing that people do. Customs are like that. We do these things, we don't realize we do them. Why? Because that's what we've observed our entire life, and we just kind of repeat and, you know, we copy everything around us. That's, I think, human nature. So I observed this little custom that sometimes when people get to this particular phrase in the prayer, as they would say, poteach et yadecha, the person praying would actually motion and open up their hand. Poteach et yadecha, you open up your hand, and people would kind of motion like that. And so when I think about it, every time, I think it's a really beautiful picture of God feeding us, sustaining us, offering us the very things that we need to live. But the way God does this is with open hand. And I'm visualizing right now as I'm driving, as I'm meditating upon these words, God's open hand, and all the things that I need are in it. And you know, I need that. I really could use that this morning, because a lot of times you work hard, you bust your hump, whatever you want to call it, you grind, you do things day after day after day after day, sometimes a repetitive motion, and you think that you're getting yourself somewhere in life. But really, it all comes from God. God's hand is right there, open for us. I think it's a beautiful picture. I think it's an image that helps me understand and put things in perspective. And as I'm driving this morning, I'm thinking, if God's hand is open, then it's not something that He just drops into my lap. He actually expects me to reach out and to take it from His hand. And that is how life really is. Many things are offered to us, but a lot of times we don't realize that we have to reach out and take it. That's a beautiful picture of our relationship with God. God has so much to give to us, but we have to be willing to take it. So that's my meditation this morning, and I hope that it makes sense to you, and I hope that it speaks to you on some level as it does to me. I'm almost to work now, so I got to wrap it up. Thanks for being with me. If you enjoy these videos, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop me a note every once in a while. And thanks for watching.